How does President Biden's decision affect the presidential race here in Virginia? Senior reporter Joe DeShio discussed that issue and others with WDBJ7 political analyst Dr. Bob Denton. Joe, what did he have to say?
Well, Patsy, President Biden answered the big question today, but his exit from the re-election campaign has raised 100 more. And Dr. Bob says it has turned this campaign on its head. We've all been hearing the calls for President Biden to drop his re-election bid. Were you surprised by his announcement?
Well, it certainly was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought if he was going to do it, it might take a little bit longer. We knew he was getting pressure to drop out. Thought maybe he would wait until the middle of next week or what have you. He certainly last spoke that he was very firm and committed to the race. So I was caught off guard that it was a written statement, not one that he could do in person and say why. So the timing of it caught me a little bit off guard, but we know that the pressure was building and building, and this is quite a consequential decision without question.
Right. And in the last few days, it seemed like there was a growing sense of inevitability about it.
It certainly did, as more and more legislators came out talking about it, more pressure primarily from the fundraisers as well. And it just seemed like that it might be he was not turning the tide in terms of being able to stay, in terms of running. And so I guess the pressure just got to the point that perhaps they thought better of it. But it does, it's an incredible event, changes the dynamics across the board.
Yeah, well, that's the next big question. What do you think this means for the presidential campaign?
Boy, I think there's unseen consequences. What is the process? Will it be the Vice President Harris that leads the ticket? Who would be the Vice President there? Will there be new set of issues, new campaigns, different states that will come in and out as battleground and what have you? It takes time, and people start voting in just a matter of several weeks in terms of early voting in some states. And so this is really just unknown territory, could have unknown consequences. Are there others other than the Vice President who will want to get involved in the race? And so I think it's just hard to see that there could go one of many different ways, but it turns it upside down and sideways without question. And we really don't know. There may be a predictive pass, but anything really could happen at this point.
Is it too early to ask what this will mean for Democratic prospects as they try to hold on to the White House?
And that's very interesting in the calculus, because there have been recent polling among several Democrats, 5 or 6 names, that do equally as well, and some a point or 2 or 3 better than Trump himself. There's also the consideration for the Democrats that perhaps, quote, if we can't salvage the top of the ticket, what about all the senators, about a third of them up? What about the House races? So the down tickets. So it's not so much of desperation, but they certainly can improve themselves in terms of the calculus, especially if it's just a close race, 2 or 3 points here, 2 or 3 points there in terms of various states can turn things around, and especially in terms of the local Senate and legislative races.
So do you have any sense of what this might mean for the presidential campaign here in Virginia?
It's kind of interesting that we are certainly not a battleground, but we're in play, and meaning that certainly Virginia can play around the margins of 3 to 4 or 5 percentage points. And there's a possibility that the Trump people think they could perhaps do that in Virginia. But whether Virginia would remain as competitive would really depend upon perhaps who the Democrats would put at the top of their ticket.
Well, we have J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee on the Republican side, coming to Radford on Monday. Does this put an even stronger spotlight on his appearance here in our part of Virginia?
Well, there's no question that if the Republicans have a chance of winning the presidency, they'll need to do very well in terms of the 9th and 5th and 6th districts. 9th district last time, 70% went for Donald Trump. So they're certainly coming home in terms of a hot spot for Virginia Republicans in Southwest Virginia. And so that's where they want to try to increase turnout if they're going to be lucky and fortunate. They'll need a strong turnout in the 9th, 6th, and 5th districts if they hope to win the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Well, what else will you be watching here in the next few days, perhaps the next few weeks?
Well, it's incredible. My head is really spinning. What is the process? Will there be additional candidates? What about all the issues and the advertising? Opposition research now, the Republicans will have to switch and change the focus in some of the arguments. Will there still be debates? What will the form of the debates be? And so it really just turns everything upside down. And it's hard to really think about in this short amount of time, quote, starting over. And so it's going to be a very, I'm afraid, very divisive still campaign as we go forward. And the stakes are high.
WDBJ7 political analyst Bob Denton, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us this evening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
So not only do we have questions about how the nomination process will play out on the Democratic side, but Gene and Melissa, also how this might affect the political climate in the weeks leading up to November 5th.
Yeah, Joe, a common denominator here that I'm hearing from Dr. Bob Denton is a lot of what if and how is this all going to play out with the process. So I think we all need to be a little patient as everything plays out, but definitely closely watching. Joe.
Yeah.